Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I trust you had a great New Year's and that this new year is going well for everyone. You'll notice that I have added a kind of an intro video now to the channel, and we'll kind of be refining that as time goes on. Also, you'll notice that I updated my channel name from Steve Walker to Soaring Eagle Outdoors. Something that I've been wanting to do for a while now, and trying to come up with a name, and that seemed to fit the whole trail name of Big Bird plus my retired rank in the Air Force. So Soaring Eagle Outdoors for now, and we'll see how that works out. All right, this is now part 3 of a series, Survivor Training 101 for the Backpacker, where we have a discussion about what backpackers need to know, the knowledge you need to have in your head to give you confidence to be able to survive. You know, our first series, we introduced the rules of 3. Second series, we talked about the first rule, which was that you only have 3 minutes to live if you have an arterial bleed. Okay, today we're going to talk about the second rule of 3, which is if the environmental conditions change on you and your body can no longer regulate your temperature, both up and down, you're only going to have 3 hours to live. All right, so we'll start off by talking first about hypothermia. And I chose that only because that's what I've experienced more in my life, and I have a lot more experience with that. And honestly, not a whole lot of people watch the whole videos, so I think they at least need to know the hypothermia aspect of backpacking. And I'll put a timestamp down below so if people want to jump ahead. Because the second thing we'll talk about is heat stroke, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of sheltering options that you can use, especially because, you know, sometimes backpackers leave their pack on the trail when they go to do their business, and what happens if they get lost and they no longer have their gear with them, then what do they do? All right, first, hypothermia. Okay, hypothermia is when your body can no longer keep itself warm at the core temperature, and that's at 36 degrees centigrade or 97 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, remember, your normal body temperature is 98.6, so if you fall below 97, your body's no longer able to maintain its core temperature, and you're going to get in trouble. Some of the things you'll experience that'll tell you that you are having an issue is you'll start to shake. Okay, shaking is your body's way of trying to exercise the muscles to generate heat. Okay, because its natural ability has now been stifled, and it's shaking to be able to generate heat. Eventually, that shaking will get violent, and then it will stop. And when it stops, now you're really in trouble. Okay. Once it stops shaking, you get this sense of euphoria. Everything is perfect. You'll not feel cold anymore. Matter of fact, you might start to feel a little hot. You'll start throwing your clothes off. Okay, people have died, like up in Alaska. They've been found naked in the snow, and they found them because of their trail of clothing they leave, and indications they were eating snow as they walked. Okay. One of the things that can get you into both the hypothermia and the heat stroke is dehydration, and it's harder when it's colder because you don't seem to be thirsty because you don't feel yourself sweating, you don't feel yourself evaporating, even though you're still expelling a lot of wet air through your mouth as you're walking. So sometimes people will start eating snow, and that will set them into the course to death. All right, so at least twice on the Appalachian Trail, within the first 45 days, I experienced the onset of hypothermia. One time was in the Smokies, where about half a day I was hiking with this cold driving rain that was just above freezing, kind of sideways. So half of my body was kind of wet on one side. And with that wind that super cools you. And I remember getting to the shelter, and I was shaking, got out of my wet clothes, had a couple of hours to kind of get warm in my sleeping bag, then got kicked out of the shelter. And that's a whole nother story with how the reservation system there works. You know, first in, last in, first out, and I was one of the last ones in, so first one's out when some people with reservations showed up. In both cases, got my tent up, get in my sleeping bag, you start getting warmer, fix a little bit of warm liquid, had a little like a chamomile tea, but you can just do warm water, and was able to bring the body temperature back. Remember that what's most important with hypothermia is you have to warm the body slowly. Okay, this is a difference with heat stroke. Got to warm the body slowly. So you just want to get a person wrapped up in it and get the, so you want, if you're doing self-aid here, you got to get your wet clothes off. My most dangerous instance with hypothermia came when I was in survival school, because as I was getting in my makeshift shelter, which was just a rain poncho strung between two trees. I bumped the tree and I got a whole load of snow dumped on me, and I was too tired to get out of my wet clothes, and I just curled in the sleeping bag wet, and I really suffered for it and just about died. Okay, so you have to get dry, get the wet clothes off. Doesn't matter if you get dry clothes on, just get in your sleeping bag. If you can get your dry clothes on, great. But if you can't, just get in your sleeping bag and start warming up. Now, if you're helping somebody, you might have to get in the sleeping bag with them. Put another sleeping bag on, unzip them both, turn them into quilts, put the other one on top, but use your body heat to get that person warm again, okay? Can you get hypothermia in the summertime? Absolutely. 2 examples, Boy Scouts. First one, we were actually hiking on the AT. We stayed at Crabtree Falls, hiked up to the Priest, came back down the falls, and the boys wanted to, that next day, and they wanted to swim in the creek, which is really cold, and they tried to get in, and they were like, whoa, and they were kind of like splashing around, and it was like way too cold, and eventually they kind of got used to the cold, and I went back to camp. A bunch of boys came back, 2 were missing, went to check on them, found them in the water because it was too cold to get out of the water. Okay, they thought, well, this is July. So we knew they were in trouble. We got them out. We kind of got them in a warm, not a hot shower, but a nice warm shower. And then they started shaking, and we got them in the sleeping bags and kind of got them recovered. Okay, and that was the middle of summertime. The other time was once again, with a scout hiking up in New Mexico. We were going up to about 11,500 feet to camp. We were probably about 9,500 feet on the climb. We stopped in this shady area for lunch. It was about 75 degrees. And this one boy started shaking and literally went right from mild hypothermia to severe, and just literally collapsed. So we got his backpack torn apart. We got his sleeping bag out. We got him in it, and warmed up some kind of just lukewarm hot chocolate. Had him start drinking that, and then he heated up another one a little bit warmer, and had him drink that, and he kind of recovered. And then we finished hiking up, but he had gotten wet. And he was he was a very lanky kid, so he didn't have a whole lot of meat on him. And with a sweat, dropping the pack, cool New Mexico air, and the dry, and he went right straight to hypothermia. And once again, that was in July. All right. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about heat stroke, which is on the opposite end. Okay. Now heat stress will come first, and then heat stroke. Okay. Now heat stress, you're sweating profusely, you're struggling a little bit. Once again, you probably haven't kept electrolytes going, and probably hiking. I've had a lot of heat stress, but I've recognized it as it's coming on. You need to pull over, you need to drink some water, take a break near that stream, take your shoes off, get your feet in the water, cool off a little bit. When heat stroke happens, it has progressed to the point where now your body has reached a temperature of 106. Let me just reference that real quickly here. 105. Okay, so, and if you know anything about the body, at 104, like if you have a fever, you are destroying processes in your body and enzyme stuff, and you're on your way to death. So if you hit 104. So heat stroke, you've already hit 105. So you're definitely in trouble, and you got to cool off now. But if you yourself are at heat stroke and you have nobody else around, honestly, you may not survive this. Okay, you may not, because you may not have the wherewithal to treat yourself. But if we are with other people and you notice that, then you might be able to help them and be able to help save their life. I'm going to reference this here. How are you going to recognize heat stroke? Okay, you might have some cramps that come from dehydration, but not necessarily. Okay, but you'll probably see a swollen or a beet red face. The whites in your eyes will turn red. You stop sweating. Okay, so so here you are. You actually stop sweating. You could go unconscious, which is why it makes it really hard to self recover if you actually go into full-blown heat stroke. Okay, you could have delirium. You have your blush color of your lips and your nails. Okay, and the skin will be cool. So if you see somebody that is literally, it looks like they should maybe suffer from some sort of a heat issue, and they have stopped sweating, and they are cool to the touch, there's probably an issue going on there. Okay. All right. When you get to this point, there's probably severe shock that's happening, and you have to cool that person as fast as possible. I mean, getting them into a cool stream. If one isn't available, douse the person with water, even urine if you have to. Okay, you've got to at least try and get cold compresses. So if you have to and you have no water around, you pee on a bandana and you get it up on the sides of their neck here. Okay, this is. So your radiators in your body are your head, your neck, your hands, and your feet, which is why, like with hypothermia, you want to get in and get those areas protected, get a hat on, things like that. Same thing then with the heat. You want to get a cool compress on these areas that radiate, so you can be able to cool the person off. Okay. All right. As that person begins to cool, all right, down, some things are going to happen, because you got to do this rapidly. There's going to be some consequences. You could have vomiting, diarrhea, struggling, shivering, shouting, prolonged unconsciousness, and you could expect a rebound stroke in about 48 hours. Heat stroke in about 48 hours. Okay. Cardiac arrest. All right. So you need to be ready to perform CPR. Obviously, a lot harder if you yourself are suffering this. There have been stories about people who have been out mowing a lawn in the heat, and the wife brings out a nice tall glass of ice cold lemonade or tea, and the person takes it and sits down underneath the tree and chugs his ice water down, and the vascular system contracts with that shock of that cold water, and they have a heart attack. Okay, so what you're doing is you're trying to rapidly cool the body, because at 105, damage is occurring. You need to get that body temperature down. Well, you need to be ready that person may end up having a cardiac arrest, in which case you'll need to do CPR. All right. Another reason to maybe take one of those first aid CPR classes from the American Red Cross if you're thinking about doing long distance backpacking, or whether you're out or if you're out of cell range or deep in the backcountry where it's going to be harder to get help. All right. Now let's transition to sheltering a little bit here. As a backpacker, both lightweight and ultralight, you're probably going to have a shelter with you. It may be a tarp, it may be a bivvy type situation, a tent. If you're traveling as couples, you want to split out the tarp from the tent, so each person has a piece of that they can use for a shelter, a makeshift shelter. Okay, if you are, let's say you have done the unthinkable, you've left your pack by the side of the trail, somebody's come by and stolen it, or you're now lost and you're in a situation with hypothermia, for example, you're going to have to find a place to shelter. And what you're going to be looking for is a small confined space that'll protect you. Okay, a big cave is not going to help as much as a little rock outcropping where you can then put some brush in front of it, because your body is what's going to be heating the shelter, and you want to have a small space. Things that can help you to create insulation: you pull up the duff, moss, leaves, pine needles, anything to be able to create some sort of an insulation for you. Break open the cattails and stuff them in your shirt, different places, and kind of puff up turn your shirt into a jacket, if you will, shoving all the cattail, kind of that cottony stuff in it. Okay, Earl Schaefer, he was the first one to hike the Appalachian Trail, and he did it again at 90. And he wrote a book, Hiking with Spring, I think it was called. And in there he talks about, if you're going to do this, if you're going to do long distance backpacking, you've got to get light. Okay. He started out, all his equipment was heavy, and he had to carry an axe to be able to do fire preparation, because he had to cook over a fire. He got to the point where he had shed off a lot of his gear, and he had just a half, because in World War II they had, each person carried half of not a teepee tent, but a little pup tent. Okay, they each carried half of a pup tent, and you'd pair up with somebody, and those halves were set up universal, so it didn't matter which one you had. It would still make you a pup tent, and then two people would sleep in it. So he had one of those. He had two of them, and he got rid of one of them and just used the small half, and would find just an outcropping of rock, a log, a branch that was just up with the ground a little bit. He'd drape that over it, and he'd make himself a little shelter. So small that his hat that he wore, he would take that off and put it at the entrance to keep either the mosquitoes out or the rain out when it was raining. So that's how tiny and close to the ground that was. Almost as if he were just laid on the ground, on a bed of leaves, and then just throwing that over top of him. That's just about what it was like. And he did the whole trail that way. All right, so anything can be used to have a shelter. Let's talk a little bit about fire. There are some hikers that like to cook on a fire, and there's hikers that like to have a fire. And on something like the Appalachian Trail, when you start out in the spring, there's plenty of wood, because the wood comes, the snows and the winds of winter knock the dead branches down out of the trees. There's plenty to be had. But as time goes on to the summer, that becomes less and less. So most people don't really rely upon fires to cook with. And I think I can remember building a fire twice in 1,400 miles on the AT. And that was more for comfort than it was for anything else. And then then in the summer, we started having them just to be able to keep the mosquitoes away and the bugs away and the gnats away. How are you with your fire building? You need to do an assessment, because at some point in time, survival means a fire. Yes, to be able to keep yourself warm, but more for signaling than anything else, to be able to have a signal for somebody to find you. All right? My son, my oldest son, I was meeting him on a scout camping. It was one of those Klondike derbies, so the whole council was up on top of Mount Taylor. And because I was coming out late, I gave him a little two-way radio so I could find out where they were. Well, he had decided he was going to go off on his own and build himself a little camp, and he was down in this draw. And when I got there, I called him. He said, "Dad, I'm glad to hear from you, because I've hurt myself with an axe, and I'm bleeding pretty good, but I don't know where I'm at." All right, so through some miracles, I was able to find him pretty quickly. But I found him in the end because I told him, I said, "Do you have a fire going?" He says, "No, not yet." And I said, "Build the biggest fire you can do." So he just built this roaring fire, and eventually we saw it through the darkness, and was able to find him. So you need to feel good about your fire building habits. I'm going to do a video on that where I'm going to introduce, not so much show you how to build a fire. There's plenty of YouTube videos on that. But very specifically, one of the things that I had with me on the trail is this. It's called a fire disc, and it's very simply a piece of one of those cotton makeup cleaning deals that the ladies use with some lighter fluid on it and dipped in paraffin wax. And you tear this thing and you light it, and it'll burn kind of like a candle for about 5 minutes. You can get any fire started if you can keep it going for 5 minutes. This weighs 0.28 ounces or 8 grams. And I threw this in my little DIY kit for the Appalachian. I'm trying to reform myself. Everybody beats me up for saying Appalachian Trail. And it gave me a piece. I never used it, okay, because I have fire building skills. But in case I was super hypothermic and shaking, I could at least probably tear this and get it lit and get a fire going if I needed. All right. I hope this has been helpful. The next series, part 4, we'll talk about the third rule, which is you only have 3 days to live if you don't have water. And we'll talk about the importance of water. We've touched on it a little bit today, but we'll talk about the importance of water and what happens if your filter breaks, you don't have your Aqua Amara with you, what's safe, what's not safe, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, everybody, have a great day, and if you're hiking, hike on. If you're planning to hit the long distance trails this spring, let me know you're going and your channel name, and I'll follow along with you, because I love to watch the hiking world. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.